So welcome everyone to our Stories of Remembrance from Hometown to the Frontlines, presented by the Transcona Museum. We want to thank you for joining us today and would just like to ask if you enjoy what we're doing to support the museum. So please consider making a donation or becoming a museum member, and that can be done on our website. You can stay in touch, so visit our website for updates and find out what's going on. You can follow us on social media, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We have a blog. You can join our mailing list where we send out usually 1 to 2 e-newsletters a month. We don't spam your inbox, so that way you're up to date with what's going on at the museum. So these are all different ways you can support the museum.
I would like to acknowledge that the Transcona Museum resides on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. So our virtual small talk today is about stories of remembrance from hometown to the front lines. And this was our new Remembrance Week exhibit that we were planning to open in a couple days, but unfortunately with COVID, we were unable to do so. But we'll still discuss, our ideas and thoughts behind this exhibit, why we decided to create a new one, and you'll get a sneak peek at some of the panels. So let's dive in. So as I mentioned, as of Monday, November 2nd, the Transcona Museum is temporarily closed to the public due to COVID-19 restrictions. And as a result, the exhibit has been postponed until further notice. But once it is safe for us to reopen to the public, we will hold the exhibit and opening ceremony as soon as we can.
Yeah, it's really quite disappointing. We were so ready to be able to do this. We had even modified our original plans. Originally, usually we do our Remembrance Week exhibit at Kildonan Place Shopping Center, but due to COVID this year, the museum board made a decision not to do it at the mall to try to keep as many people safe as possible, but also we had to make sure that we were able to fulfill the requirements that Kildonan Place would have. So we made the decision to move it to the museum, but run it for a longer period of time. So it was going to be from November 5th to November 30th. However, last Friday, the restrictions changed, and so we had to close. But we will be, it doesn't matter when we get to reopen. When we do reopen, we will put the exhibit on display because it is very important. And we will be holding a virtual opening ceremony with it. So keep an eye out on that. It will be happening live on Facebook. And we had practiced for it and everything. We were so ready to go, and just unfortunately, we couldn't do it this year, like when we normally wanted to.
Yeah. So why did we create a new Remembrance Week exhibit for 2020?
Well, typically we do a new exhibit every 4 to 5 years because we go to Kildonan Place Shopping Center and we're able to reach such a large audience when we do. After a number of years, people have seen it before. We often uncover new stories as we're doing research and new information comes to light. So to keep it fresh, but to also keep it relevant to everything that's going on, we change it up. So this one was also supposed to be like a Manitoba 150. It's also a Manitoba 150 celebration because we're celebrating the stories of Manitobans.
And our previous display, it had kind of run its lifespan too, because it was commemorating remembrance from, those 100th anniversary dates from 1914 to, it was from 2014 to 2020. So this year would have run its natural end. So we decided, let's create a new one with new stories, new perspectives. And we really had fun actually creating this one.
Yeah, like this year, it's we had someone leave a comment on our Zoom. This year's also the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. So a lot of commemorations have happened over the past couple of years, things happening this year. We thought, what a better time than to build a new exhibit. And like Jen said, we had a lot of fun. We actually haven't introduced ourselves.
No, we haven't yet.
We get kind of bad at that. I'm Alana Hareda, and I'm the curator at the Transcona Museum.
And I'm Jennifer Maxwell. I'm the assistant curator at the Transcona Museum.
And we worked together to put this exhibit together. We also got funding from the Heritage Grants program through the province of Manitoba as well for this exhibit.
So if you've seen our Remembrance Week exhibits before at KP, in the past couple of years, you'll notice that our setup is a big serpentine system. The story and the panels themselves all blended in together quite nicely. I rather enjoyed that look. But we decided to go in a very different direction with our look of the exhibit this year.
Yes, for this year, we decided we wanted to make it was a traveling exhibit before, but to really make this one that is able to travel. So the exhibit is actually done on pop-up banners, which means we can change the order in which the panels are displayed. We can set them up in a row or in sort of like a spiral. There's a lot of options of what we're able to do. We're also able to transport this one just a little bit easier than the other system. The other system is a traveling system. However, it has a lot
very heavy.
It's heavy, it has a lot of pieces, and it takes some time to set up. And this one will not take as much time to set up, which after a while, 10 years of using that serpentine system, it's also showing wear and tear. So we wanted to have a new exhibit ready so that, you know, we didn't go to use the serpentine system and then unfortunately maybe it wouldn't have worked anymore.
And with the serpentine system too, like the exhibit has to be displayed in its entirety. With this one, if it is a smaller venue that we decide to travel to, we don't have to take the entire system. We can take a smaller number of banners and pop them up, and the stories all stand on their own, which was another focus of our storytelling aspect this year.
And then another thing too is, like we said earlier, we tend to run the same exhibit for 4 to 5 years. We have an opportunity with this new system to add additional stories for the future with the same layout, where we weren't able to do that with our last exhibit. It had to go in the order it was in. We had to make sure the panels were placed so that it was blended correctly. With this one, we could add another 20 stories if we wanted to, because we have 18 stories that we're telling in the panels. So, but we have the opportunity to add more as more information comes to light, as new stories come to light, as we learn new things.
So I don't think we've really introduced the title of our exhibit. It's Stories of Remembrance from from hometown to the front lines. And it looks at 18 individual stories based on a certain theme. So some of the ones we have behind us, women I have, and shell shock. And
I have animals in war and joining up, which is all about enlistment. We also, and there's 18, as Jen said, 18 different stories. So there's more than what we have here.
And all of them have a very similar look. They have a very big graphic visual image. And then the next big jump out of the panel is a quote directly from the individual, or, you know, an individual that we wanted to highlight in the story, and then some additional context along with that quote. So it's really telling their stories, their voices, instead of us just interpreting it as we tend to have in the past.
Yeah, we really wanted to focus on the personal aspect, the personal stories that we hold in our collection and in our archives of individuals who lived through and participated in World War I and World War II. So trying to make this one a bit more personal, but also an opportunity for people to maybe connect to the exhibit in a new way, by reading a quote and thinking, yeah, maybe that's exactly how I would feel in that situation, or I had no idea. When you hear someone's personal experiences about what it was like being in the trenches, it's a little different than just, and they were in the trenches for so long and this is what happened to them. Hearing someone's personal story really kind of brings their sacrifices to life.
And our stories kind of hit an emotional, it hits in the feels. We have some really great funny stories, but we also have some really, heartbreaking stories. So we're touching on all different aspects of the war experience.
And some of the stories that we're telling are ones that have not been told throughout our previous exhibits that we've done in the past. And some are stories that you may have known, but from a new perspective or some new information coming from it. So there's more. We're building out the information and the history to tell a broader story of remembrance in Transcona.
So now with this exhibit, when we were planning to hold it at the museum, we were also going to do daily live stories that looked, it delved deeper into each panel. We might have other artifacts or, additional aspects of the stories that we would have brought out. Unfortunately, we were unable to do that, but we are still planning to once the exhibit is on.
Once we're able to get back into the museum and get the exhibit set up and open it up to the public, we understand that some people still may not be able to come into the museum to view the exhibit just with the current pandemic situation on. And so we want to make it available to as many people as possible. So like Jen said, we're going to be doing daily lives where we, deep dive into one panel a day, where, we talk about it, we show it, and then, go into more about why we chose the story, what more information we have, because what you see is just a fraction of actually the information that we have and the detail that we have. We just have to put it into a small readable format. So there's more information, there's more artifacts, there's more things that we can talk about. As well, too, as part of the exhibit, we have a traveling display case that we also have that will be with this exhibit, with some of the artifacts we had planned to use on display. But because we're doing it in the museum this year, we're actually going to be able to bring out even more than what we would have been able to take to Kildona Place Shopping Center. So there'll be some uniforms on display. There'll be more letters and cards and things like that on display, some actual pieces that relate to some of the panels and the stories, more so than what we could just fit in that singular traveling display case that we also
have. What we can, though, offer at this time is I have a new blog up on our website, and it's all about Transcona and the Second World War. So looking at those individuals who were killed in action during World War II, where they're buried, where they're commemorated. So that is available on our website, on our blog, and this is in addition to one I did a couple of years ago, which looked at First World War killed in action. So that is available for reading as of 1 o'clock today.
Yeah. So a lot going into it. I can't remember. What's the next slide, Jen?
The next slide is a sneak peek.
All right, so we're gonna, I guess, try to do this with our laptops.
Yep, so I guess I need to stop the share.
Yes, so you can see ourselves a bit larger.
There we go. Oops.
Okay.
Start with you.
Okay, I am going to attempt to hold my laptop so you can see. So the first one here, this is animals in war. Actually, we have a number of photographs and, well, actually quite a few photographs. We found even more photographs than we thought we actually had, all depicting animals during war. So it was the question of why were animals, how were they being used? Why were they where they were? Did that make sense? Why were they where they were. And so, and photos from like World War I and World War II. So the large image that you see, that's actually the crew of the HMCS Transcona. And right, look at they're right there. That, that is Skipper. Skipper was the mascot of the HMCS Transcona. So he was actually like born on the ship. And apparently until the end of the war had only actually come onto land one time. So we have a story about Skipper and his first experiences seeing women, actually. But then there was another Transconian who actually served on the HMCS Uganda. And that ship also had a dog, the dog Cordite. So we have images there, that is of the dog Cordite that served on that ship. And a lot of naval ships had mascots, and because it was, you know, perceived to bring good luck, but it wasn't necessarily always just dogs. Let's see, some, like, it could be cats, but also bears, goats, and birds at times were also used as mascots. So just one story, but truly connected to Transcona, because the HMCS Transcona is named after the community. The community adopted it, and you know, essentially worked together to help provide for the sailors on the ship, and basically, you know, helped send them supplies and things that they needed. So Cordite, and well, Cordite is from the HMCS Uganda, but Skipper, he's you know, he was an important part of the HMCS Transcona.
Okay. See if this works. You can see me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Whoops. I'm in a very small space here. There we go. We'll try that. So this panel right here, this is all about women in war. And we know of at least 8 women from Transcona who served in the Second World War in the Canadian Women's Army Corps and the Women's Division of the Royal Canadian Air Force. So we have a series of, tilt down, there we go, images of these women. These were taken from local newspapers. We also have several scrapbooks at the museum where we were able to pull these images. But we were really excited about this big one here. We came across it, and this is actually, she's standing in front of the post office in Transcona, and the corner over here is where our building would be today, the Transcona Museum, the old, the bank at the time, the Bank of Toronto. So one aspect we were really wanting to tell was women's experiences in the war, because we did know that women served in the Second World War. We are still unsure if women from Transcona served in the First, but it is another perspective of the story that is very important to tell. And the quote that we have is of one of the women from Transcona talking about her experiences serving with the bomber groups out of Britain and how they are just really excited to be here and doing their part to help.
And isn't one of those women along the bottom, isn't one of them the one who met the Queen Mum, who we also have an image of?
Yes. So her right there, her name is Georgina Ryan Davy.
Yeah. Okay, the next one, let's see, is all about enlistment. So, you know, Transconians doing their part and enlisting for World War I and World War II. Over 400 men enlisted from Transcona enlisted for World War I, and over 800 men and women enlisted for World War II. And we know of at least 8 men from Transcona who served in the Korean War. So it's just talking about enlisting and doing their part the population of Transcona roughly around the start of World War I was about 1,200 people. So 400 men enlisting is a significant impact to the community itself. And then, 800 men and women, a lot of them were had previously been students at Central School. It's where we've essentially gotten a lot of the names from some of our honor rolls. But Transconians really did their part, but not only just by joining up, but also on the home front, which we also talk about in the exhibit as well. But this image is just a great image of people in Transcona. We're not sure on the dates of it specifically, but it's a great image, and it dates from the World War I period time.
Before I do my second one, I just have a couple questions here that came in. Have you ever looked at churches for their honor rolls?
We actually have the Knox United Church honor roll at the museum. It was donated to the museum a number of years ago. We also have 2 honor rolls from the C&R shops that have been donated to the museum, one from the car department, one from the stores department. And then I do know a couple of churches have honor rolls as well. So.
And then the next question, what happened to the HMCS Transcona? After the war, it was decommissioned and given over to the RCMP. The RCMP used it for several decades, and then it was scrapped. We have the wheel of the HMCS Transcona at the museum. There was a letter writing campaign, though, that went all the way up to the Prime Minister to try and get the original bell from the HMCS Transcona. Unfortunately, we only were able to get a replica, but the original bell is now in the Naval Museum in Winnipeg, along with several other original bells from World War II ships.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so we actually have the wheel on display at the museum. So if you visit the museum, you'll actually be able to see the actual ship's wheel and our replica bell with this exhibit as well.
So the other panel that I have here, hopefully you can see. So this one is all about shell shock and World War I. So I was able to find a quote from now they were either from Transcona and had it listed in Winnipeg, or were from the Winnipeg community, but very excited we were able to find a relatively close connection. But it's talking about his friend. He was standing at the train platform in Winnipeg, and his shell shock condition was such that he didn't even recognize his own mother and his own family members. This individual had actually attempted to re-enlist for a second time, but he was denied because of his condition. Now, when he had enlisted the first time, he was overseas, he was serving. A shell exploded while he was in the trench, and he was buried within the trench, and he came to in hospital several days later. And then they noticed, the shell shock syndrome, that he was having a lot of difficulty, and rightly so. A lot of the experiences that they witnessed over there are unimaginable to me. So he was medically discharged, sent home. He attempted to re-enlist, but unfortunately, just like I said, his condition was such that he was not able to. So that was once again, another very important story that we wanted to tell. And, the quote itself just is quite shocking, if I may use that word, just wasn't able to recognize his own family members.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other panels, and we don't have it here, but one that sticks out to me was a young man wrote a letter home during World War I, wrote a letter home to the parents of a friend of his from Transcona who was killed in action. And that letter was received just days actually before he was actually killed in action, and then a letter was written home to his family. So you know, like it was just, it really brought into perspective these two friends, and one, you know, wanted to let his family know, his friend's family know that what happened to him, and when he himself just a few months later was actually killed in action too, and someone else wrote home for him. So that was like very, not, it was like a cruel twist of fate, where, you know, it's a friend looking out for another friend, and you know, this, he suffered from the same fate.
And I mean, those are some examples of, you know, the more heart-wrenching stories that we have. And then we don't have the panels here, but we have some great ones of moments of humor. You know, I'm trying to remember what the quote was. I'm blanking.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember it now. It was in World War II. His name was Jim Tom. He was overseas and he was writing home to his father, who was the police chief at the time. And he was talking about, you know, played my first round of dice, won a couple dollars, then my wallet got lifted, played, you know, a couple other games the next night, got a new lighter, had it long enough to light one cigarette, and then it too was stolen. You know, it's what it is, but we're having a great time with our friends here.
Yeah, and like we have a large number of like cards and letters written to the soldiers serving overseas, but also from them, usually to the War Efforts Committee, thanking them for the socks or the chocolate or the cigarettes that they sent them. But the soldiers actually couldn't say what was happening. They couldn't give any details. So all of them are like, well, everything's fine here and we're doing just dandy. And, you know, I saw so-and-so from Transcona not so long ago, when, you know, it really wasn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do have some letters that were received back to the War Efforts Committee where, unfortunately, we couldn't deliver this care package you had sent because the young man had been killed in action. And that was that particular letter that I'm thinking about, that was Billy McCann, where there is a park actually named after him in Transcona, just right across from Equal Central.
And I mean, those are just several stories that we mentioned, and we have 18 of them, you know, prepped for this exhibit. So we're really excited to be able to hold this exhibit for everybody to, you know, read and experience these stories for themselves.
And if you're able to come into the museum once we're able to reopen to visit the exhibit, fantastic. If you're not able to come in, we will be doing daily lives on Facebook. And you can go to our Facebook page at any time and go back and view lives that we've done. But then at the end of the exhibit, we'll actually take all those videos and edit them together and actually put it on our YouTube channel as well. So create one longer video all about the exhibit and have it up there too for people to go and watch at any time. Because Remembrance, you know, Remembrance Day is coming up and it's important, but we can remember at any time too. This is, you know, the one day that it's really vocal about, but you know, at the museum, we take our remembrance and our telling of these stories and like collecting their stories very seriously. And so there's always a remembrance aspect on display at our museum. And we often do little pop-up exhibits for Decoration Day, as well as we do our large one for Remembrance Day, usually at KP, this year at the museum and virtually when we can get back in. We did have a question come in through our Zoom. Are there any Transcona veterans from World War II still alive? Yes, there are still some alive. However, every year there are fewer and fewer still alive. And there are no longer any living veterans from World War I on either side of World War I. So that being said, I feel it's even more important that, you know, museums and archives, and we do our best to try to tell these stories about these personal experiences as best we can, because there's no one left to tell us what happened during World War I. We can now only just tell the stories that have already been written down, that have already been collected. So the stories of World War II are likely soon it's going to be like that too. So the more that we can collect and the more that we can gather, the better. We have another question, have you ever considered capturing their oral history stories? We actually have a number of oral history stories at the museum already that have been collected of veterans, and I believe all the veterans stories that we have, they have all since passed their stories, but we do have them at the museum, and we did reference those oral histories too while we were doing this exhibit as well.
Yeah, so where did we get our sources for a lot of these stories?
Well, it's what the community's given us. That's the majority of our collection. However, we also do have the Transcona newspapers from very early days, like 1912 to 1917. Unfortunately, we don't have a 1918 newspaper, which would be very helpful right now. Just to even see how the community reacted to the Spanish influenza and everything. So there wasn't, as far as we have in our collection, a 1918 and 1919 paper, but we also have from 1931 on of the Transcona News, which at one point was the Transcona in Eastern Manitoba News, in our archives as well. We have donated to us the Transcona War Efforts Committee a lot of their paperwork. So cards and letters and lists that they had of soldiers who, or Transconians who had enlisted overseas and where they were. We have photographs donated by individuals. We have medals donated by family members of people from Transcona who served. So, but we also are able to access now, well, you know, with the internet, there's more and more information available online, even through Library and Archives Canada and other archives online. And it seems as more and more is digitized, we're able to access some of it. Some of it for World War II is still held under privacy laws. So we can see the files for individuals who were killed in World War II. However, veteran files, we have no access to. Did I miss anything anywhere else?
One of the stories came from a book. So that's our Transcona and the French Resistance story.
Yeah, I love that story. Okay, I call that.
Should we mention it, or should we just like tease people?
Maybe a little clickbait is good.
Okay.
But there was a Transconian saved by a Hollywood starlet. Just gonna say that during World War II.
And she wrote a book, so that's where we get the story.
And I didn't even know about the story until I think it was a family member a number of years ago donated the book to the museum, and I read it, and then I've since been making sure that that story is told. Now, he survived the war and he actually moved out to British Columbia, but he was from Transcona, so it's a Transcona story.
Books, letters, you know, World War I personnel files is where we got some of that, and that's where I was able to get the shell shock story from.
We also have our books of honor, which
yes.
we have, and this has been a long running project at the museum, but over the years, through our actual honor rolls that we have with the names of individuals from Central School and the car department and the Knox United Church, it was essentially started gathering all the names of everyone we know of from Transcona who enlisted in World War I, World War II, and we've even started a Korean War one. And then it was going through the newspapers trying to get names from there. A number of people, we have a couple of scrapbooks that were put together by individuals in the community who then, you know, they cut out any article that they saw about a Transconian serving overseas. So we've gotten names that way. And we've just been adding and adding to these books. And then at times we do have family members who come in and say, my uncle or my grandfather or my mother, it's, you know, not included in this book. So we do have a form we can give them and fill it out, and then we'll create a new record for our books of honor. The caveat for that is they have to have lived in Transcona when they enlisted. So if they moved to Transcona after the war, they're not included in our books of honor. It's just if they were living in Transcona when they enlisted.
I think, yeah, I think that covers a lot of our resources.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if I can share the screen again. There we go. So sneak peek, done that. All right, so additional questions that you may have. So please use the chat function if you're using Zoom, or the comment section in Facebook. We monitor this, at least the Facebook, and when this eventually goes up on YouTube, we monitor those. So if any questions appear after the fact, we will get to them as well.
Yep, and there's a bit of a delay with the Facebook Live, so we'll just take a moment and wait for the Facebook to catch up. But I am monitoring the Facebook on my phone. See if there's any additional questions. So we started this exhibit, the idea for it, we started talking about it last year during last year's Remembrance Week.
Yes.
We applied for the grant to build the exhibit in January. Found out we got the funding, I think it was June, mid-June. And then actually we had a completely different design for the panels that we looked at and went, I think we can make this better. So redesigned the panels. And then by October, we sent everything to the printers. So, you know, it takes a while to build these exhibits. Don't have any questions on Facebook.
Okay, but if you're watching this after the fact, please do leave your questions in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of upcoming talks, oops, I should have edited that. Just with COVID and the fact that the museum has to be closed at this time, all in-person events have been canceled. So if you want to attend a small talk, it's through Zoom, which you can go onto our website and register for the link there, or you can just pop onto Facebook at the correct time and watch from there. So at this time, we have 2 more coming up, but we might plan some additional in between now and then. So on December 1st at 1 p.m. is a history of Regent Avenue to the 1930s. This talk has been given previously, but it has been since updated with new information and photos.
And this one we never recorded when we did it previously, so we're going to record it so then it's available on our YouTube channel as well.
And on December 15th at 1 p.m. is Snapshot, a look into 1960s Transcona, Part 2.
So part 1 actually seemed to be very popular. A lot of people enjoyed it. And what it is we have a collection of over 2,000 negatives from the Transcona News, which we have since digitized. And we were able, using the Transcona newspaper, to reference what events they were, what, who the individuals are, like the photos were taken of. There's dates. So using the newspaper, we actually have a lot more information. If we didn't have the newspapers, it would be like unknown person at unknown event, an unknown year. So it's quite fun going through. A lot of the photos that we post on our Facebook page are actually from that collection as well, but we've gone through, and for the first one, we went through and picked out some favorites. So we'll be doing that again for part 2.
And like I said, this is what we had planned before this current lockdown. So we will most likely be planning a couple new ones in between today and December 1st.
But hopefully we're only closed for the 2 weeks.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So once again, if you like what we're doing, please support the Transcona Museum. You can consider making...
Oh, Jen froze, or I froze.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Oops. So right, support the museum if you like what we're doing. So make a donation or become a museum member. You can stay in touch. We have our website. We have our social media pages, and you can join our mailing list. And thank you so very much for joining us today.
Yeah, this was fun. And we hope that you'll join us for our next virtual small talk as well.
All right. Bye.
Bye.